Access Fort Wayne offers reflections of our community. Production facilities provided by Access Fort Wayne are a service of the Allen County Public Library. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting organizations. For more information about creating your own television program with Access Fort Wayne, call 421-1250.
A French woman told me an island is filled with loneliness. She said an island is filled with magnificence, and then an island is filled with mystery. That is Cuba, island in the sky. And the sky, she whispered to me, has always been the open area of dreams. She also said the Cuban people are so secret. Who knows what dreams they share? I will tell you the dreams they shared with me. I met many children not much younger than me who have so little in comparison to us here in America. They study crammed into tiny classrooms no bigger than closets. I watched as they practiced ballet in sweltering heat with no ventilation. In the country, students work in fields baked brown by the burning sun. Yet as I observed the smiles of joy across the faces of the children and listened to their laughter as they played on the playground, I began to think that maybe material things are not so important after all. They made me realize that there is something in these kids that transcends political agendas and geographical boundaries.
Anyway, I'm Doran, and I'm going to show some documentary clips. This is Nathan Bechtold from Indiana Filmmakers Network, who invited me tonight, and the network's a statewide organization. Nathan can tell you more about that.
Yeah, let me break that for a minute. So I want to thank Terrence for coming up, because that's awesome. And thank everybody for coming. So what the Indiana Filmmakers Network is a 501c3 educational charitable organization. We have 8 hubs across the state. We meet here every last Thursday of the month with different topics. We did improv as a special workshop in the summer because most people are busy in the summer, so we get that, and attendance is light. So we have fun. We have next month, tentatively, we're still working on that, but animation spotlight with my friend Matthew, who is a 14-year veteran animator of The Simpsons. He's an Indiana boy. He still actively works on The Simpsons. He's an animator. He'll be coming next month for our meeting. Plus 2 other animators from around the state talking about different aspects of animation. So from rotoscoping to stop motion and claymation. So there's a lot of different kinds. And in a couple months, we'll have a pre-production, the importance of pre-production with my friend Mark Raycop. And Mark Raycop, which I'll talk about, he's also the only person licensed in the world to recreate the 1966 Batmobile. He is having a convention coming up in September in Logansport, Indiana, which isn't too far away. It has the original Bat Copter and original Bat Cycle will be there, and we'll be there filming and doing workshops as well. This weekend, I'll be down at Indie Shorts. We're running panels all day Saturday. Indie Shorts is at Heartland International Film Festival. We helped start this with Heartland. And then in next 2 weeks, I'm running some film workshops in Carmel, Indiana for script writing and acting workshops. Those are also free, and if you're able to come down, you're more than welcome to come down. They're going to be very informative. There's going to be a lot of celebrity guest speakers there too. Mostly Indiana people working on films. So what we normally do at meetings, we go around the room and say who we are and what we are working on, our passions, our goals, our projects. And let's just start it off and go around the room. I know, put you on the spot.
My name's Bob Hanauer, and my passion is music. I guess I don't play music, but I was a student at Terry's school. That's when I knew Terry, and just hang out and see what he's up to.
Cool, thank you.
Cynthia Smeltzer, and I'm married to one of the best drummers around, Steve Smeltzer, my husband, and I'm passionate about my grandkids.
You want to chime in, Matt?
Matt McClure, I'm the executive director of ArtLink over there, and I'm passionate about storytelling, so hence this.
Hi, my name is Jim Britt. I've always loved films and movies, and about a year or so ago I started picking up some equipment and deciding I was going to start shooting some stuff, so I'm kind of a rookie.
No problem. Oh.
I'm Isabel Nunez. I'm the chair of the School of Education at Purdue Fort Wayne, and I know Terry through the education community in Fort Wayne, and here to see more of the stuff.
Yeah, Ian Randall. I've never really made any movies, but storytelling's always been very interesting to me, and hoping to start that soon. So this is kind of interesting just to check out. We'll see what it's all about.
I'm Kim Bradford. I met Terry through a mutual friend of ours named Bill White, which he will be probably in one of these scenes here today. And my passion is young education. I'm an early childhood educator, and so that's why I'm here, because Terry invited me.
Hi, I'm Victoria Wiss. I work as a news producer at Wayne TV. I do the weekend morning show there. And I also dabble as a documentary shorts filmmaker.
I'm Craig Nix. I write short stories. I'm also on the board here at Cinema Center, so I'm here primarily just to keep an eye on everyone.
We'll be good.
Yes.
Well, and she has a short film this weekend.
I do, in Indie Shorts. Yeah, it's on Thursday and Sunday.
I'm Bob Brandt. I'm a volunteer at Access, and I work with Terry on a lot of his projects.
Well, Bob, since you're running the camera, do you want to step in front of it?
I'm Bob Hunter, and among a lot of other things, I just finished a 2-hour documentary on the life of Terry Doran, part of which you'll see in a couple of minutes.
So doesn't she himself?
Is that ethereal voice on camera?
Yes, well.
Well, we'll get to Terry here in a minute.
I'm Patty Hunter. I'm the wife of the documentary director, Bob Hunter.
And she admits it.
You got it on camera, so.
Anyways, I have my own TV show called Patty's Page, and I Terry Doran as being my co-host for Patty's Page, and I am working for Track Three Rivers Art Center for Kids, which Terry Doran is the founder, and I'm the artistic coordinator, and we're having a ball putting these events on for everybody here in Fort Wayne and around the county here.
Very nice. Thank you.
I'm Joe Jackson, MJ Jackson. I own Fresh Eye Promotions. I met Terry Doran through Patty Hunter. She won a writing contest. Terry Doran, I fell in love with him. He is an inspiration to me. I looked up to that man ever since I started Fresh Eye Promotions. He's been directing me, helping me, guiding me. And what I do is I write short stories, children's books. I'm hoping he works on a play of mine. And I try and collect all your guys' stuff on everything I do, because you guys all do positive things here in the state of Indiana. And I try and collect all your guys' stuff, so I'm glad to meet all you guys. And I want to collect all your guys' stuff too, and put it on my site for everybody to see what we do in this city.
That's awesome, thank you. And please feel free to share whatever you want publicly
And
on
we
our
have-
private pages. So, and Lisa came in, she snuck in.
Snuck in. And hi, I'm Lisa Makewell. I'm originally from Fort Wayne. I live in Indianapolis now. I have a feature and a couple of shorts under my belt. My sister and I just completed a novel called Shattered Perceptions and collaborated over the phone to complete that. I'm scripting that into a movie. I wrote a script for a movie called A Forgotten Timepiece, which will be filmed in Georgia in October. Just now starting to put my hand in trying to do a music video. I just was rushing, that's why I'm late, trying to get the script off to the artist. And I'm in line to do 3 documentaries, so that's why I'm here. Alice Dunnigan is one, a guy named Mr. Lee out of New Jersey who was in the boxing world, and then one on Walk Home.
Very cool, thank you. So a little bit more about the Indiana Filmmakers Network is that we are a 501c3 statewide organization. We've been around for quite a while. And different hubs do different things, but we do offer different workshops at different events. We always, like I said, have different engaged guest speakers at our monthly events or for free. But you can book things through us. We're constantly doing that. We actually are working on education pieces right now. So we're working with Pixar in a Box and the Khan Academy for next year, trying to get that organized. We cannot be distributors, but we're working on a distribution deal, which is more a facilitation deal for like streaming media and stuff like that, working with area studios. So as for one of those studios here in the area is Midwest Film Factory in Auburn, Indiana. And they are doing a piece with us called Showcase and Spotlight. And what that is like how we did it go around the room. It's to showcase what's in the community, who's in the community, what they're doing, what their passions are, and have 10, 15-minute long dialogue and work with other studios. So it's about cross-pollination of creativity, working with different organizations. So I'm very hopeful to do more in the Fort Wayne area, obviously, because we do this statewide and in Chicago and in Louisville. So on that note, if you have any other questions, please direct it to me or look up Indiana Filmmakers Network at www.indianafilmmakers.org, and I will give it to Terrence. Thank you. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you for inviting me. Well, there's actually people who make documentaries here. Usually when I do documentaries, I'm in good shape because nobody's made one, so I have a lot to compare to. But anyway, thank you all for coming. Julie Shear runs Midwest Film Factory. She is a friend, and I keep meaning to get there in Auburn and visit her. Anyway, I'm Terry Doran, and Nathan invited me. Bob Hunter, you heard, has made a documentary about my life called Portrait of a Pioneer. He included clips in the documentary from my documentaries. So we prepared about 20 minutes. We're running a little late, so I don't know, but we spent an hour getting here with a van full of equipment to get a flash drive hooked into a laptop, into a projector to play them. So I think we should play something. Maybe, I don't know, all of them. Anyway, they represent work I've done. I've made documentaries that have won awards. I'm a little shy because my stuff is low budget. But I will say one of my great honors was Eagle Gone. There's a clip that's my most award-winning documentary about Native Americans of Indiana. Anyway, it was selected in Marion County, Indianapolis Library to show in a series called Homegrown. There are about 7 films made in Indiana. All of them were Hollywood movies, except mine, my little Eagle Gone. And in the audience vote, Eagle Gone was voted their favorite. So that means a lot to me because I'm not a big budget filmmaker. I won some awards. And also here at the Cinema Center, another thrill, they showed, this is a while back, but they showed The Hunt for Oscar, another one of my, that also won a documentary, won me a free trip to UCLA. Oscar, the giant 500-pound turtle, did not go because A, nobody had found him, but B, he wouldn't have been in the plane anyway. So, but the projectionist, when he ran The Hunt for Oscar, told me, said, I'm showing hundreds of movies here. It's all I do. It's my full-time job. The only one I ever watched was The Hunt for Oscar. I think he liked it, but at least he watched it. That was nice. So another documentary clip, Maria, the famous Lady of the Lines in South America, Peru, South America. They entered that. She was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. They entered the documentary as part of their support material. So things like that is what I can tell you is I've got to do as a filmmaker and meet a lot of people, and all of you are all creative. So I thank you again for coming. So I guess we can show some clips. If you get bored, raise your hand. We'll stop and we'll talk some more. It's a choice between being bored by my clips or being bored by me. But if you start talking, then it's less of me. Four boys. Betty Jane Spencer was the mother. 3 were her stepsons. 1 was her son. They were all 8 of them about the same age. And these 4 guys lined them up on the floor, shot them point blank, killed all 4 of them. Shot Mrs. Spencer in the back of the head. She had a wig that flew off. They thought she was dead. She crawled to a neighbor's help. Anyway, that's The Shadow of the Dream. There's a clip from that. That was shown at the U.S. Department of Justice, which I know maybe isn't something to brag about, but hey, this was a while back, so it was well received. Anyway, we're ready to show something here. League of Our Own, which had its roots in Fort Wayne. I wanted more explanation. But anyway, Isabel Alvarez has a cameo at the very beginning. You probably all have seen that. She's getting on a bus and playing herself. The main character by Gina Davis is based on Dottie Collins, another friend who played on the Daisies. Allegedly based, I mean, I wasn't there, I'm not saying for sure, but pretty sure it was based on Dottie Collins, who was probably the best player ever to play in the league. And then Hoosiers, the movie made about Milan, 1954. Even if you're not from Indiana, you probably have heard of that movie and that game where Milan, a little farm school, with about, I don't know, 20 males in their senior class, defeated Muncie Central for the state championship, and they stalled, which added to the legend. They stalled 2 points behind with about a minute to go. They're still stalling. There were fouls, the game. Anyway, Bobby Plump became an Indiana legend. He hit a jump shot at the gun. Milan won. 2 Indiana guys made a movie, Hoosiers. And Hilliard Gates, whose voice was over the empty gym of Central Catholic. I love that scene because I love imagination. It's why I love Oscar. Oscar had no film at 11, no cable crews. It was all on the radio, all on your imagination. And the Chicago Tribune sent divers out there, and there was a giant crowd. They trampled down the fence. Mrs. Harris told me that she'd be having coffee, look up, and there'd be some stranger coming out of her bathroom. There were no probably porta-johns or anything else. But anyway, Hilliard, I said that because I love the imagination of Central Catholic, the empty gym, you can imagine the crowd. Hilliard Gates was a legendary local broadcaster, and he did the broadcasting for the movie Hoosiers, so connection to Hollywood there. The two clips, Miss Virginia and the Snakes, in case you wonder what they had in common, that was from a documentary called Voices of Hunger, commissioned by the Community Harvest Food Bank. And Miss Virginia obviously had to be interviewed. I loved her. I did a lot of work with her. I admired her immensely. And the Snakes, we were looking for how poor people empower themselves. And the people handling the snakes empower themselves by feeling like they are blessed by God to handle the snakes. Arnold Saylor, who was the head guy there, he, what?
That's my uncle.
That's your uncle?
Yeah, I'm related to them guys. He got bit by snakes so many times and he ended up dying.
Well, Arnold Saylor died of a heart attack, but it might have been brought on by snake bite.
Yeah,
I went to his house. They own Runyon, what's the name? Sailor Pizza on Runyon.
Pizza on Runyon.
Yeah. I asked him, I said, they call them serpents, you keep serpents in your house? He says, oh God, no, I'm terrified of them things.
Yeah.
They feel like they're anointed. Anyway, that's a connection for Voices of Hunger. And we also went to migrant camp in Bluffton, and I did another documentary. There's some articles, headline stories about the documentaries over here if you want to look at them. I was also commissioned by the Fort Wayne Bicentennial Committee to make a documentary. We placed it in a time capsule, and the only problem is this was mid-90s. We taped it on VHS, so when they open that time capsule, they're not going to be able to play on VHS. It never occurred to anybody. How are they going to, the technology would change and there's no such thing as VHS and they won't have a deck. But anyway, the thought was theirs. I was proud to get the opportunity to do that. Okay, any questions? That's a little background with it, or any comments besides anybody else have an uncle?
Well, I'm going to put my
Or
VHS
aunt?
player up somewhere so I can still use it.
Pardon?
I'm going to put one of mine up that's still working. I'm going to put it up somewhere so I can still use it when that happens.
All right. All right.
Time capsule with the VHS.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Newspaper articles for documentaries, are those fair game? Or do you have to get permission to use them?
Oh, in the story, the document?
Newspaper articles.
Sometimes it depends. Usually newspaper articles, I don't feel like I have to ask permission. The one you might have been referring to from Garrett, where it said Garrett welcomes Katrina survivors. That is my last documentary was the last one, a little clip from the river trip. That ends with a quote from Anne Frank about the camaraderie those people displayed on that trip was fantastic. I tried to show just a little bit of it there at the end. They were tired. I left the natural sound instead of putting music, so I hope you get the feeling that you're sort of there with them, with the wind. And it was a grueling trip. And I'd like to say I paddled all 141 miles. I paddled 0 miles. Because, as a filmmaker, I had to be taken care of. And also, I'm a coward, and also I probably would have drowned. Other than that, I would have been glad to have paddled. I did go in the canoe once, and but some of the people paddled the entire route. I think all 3 of them at the end. That was Aunt Abby King, who was the instigator of Save Me, the leader, and she paddled the entire route. All 140, all 3 of those people did at the end. Several did. So that was the last one a few years ago, and the new one that I haven't finished, it's halfway done, is about Garrett and Katrina and the town of Garrett taking in these people, and I am not a big fan of a lot of American values, as you can probably tell from Mr. Horncloud and the environment, and As you probably know, our government is proposing to send on the railroads through the middle of America, which includes Garrett. Garrett's known as the railroad town. The irony was just too great. I could not resist. Sending nuclear waste on a railroad through a town that prides itself for its railroad history. And to Yucca Mountain in Nevada, which would be great for the people in Nevada to have a whole mountain full of nuclear waste. And in the documentary, and that documentary is different for me because I've never used an actor. I use an actor, and it's called Poison in My Town. And in that, I try to show the love the people of Garrett have for the Katrina survivors and for their town. And then it's like a love letter to America, Americana, but at the end it blows up. There's a wreck, a derailing. As you probably know, these oil trains derail frequently. Anyway, that's why I included that little clip. So, anything else, Nathan?
Do you have any particular process of getting your documentaries in order? Do you do a basic outline? How do you structure your documentary?
Well, thank you. I thought somebody might ask me how I make documentaries, so I've been trying to figure out how I do that. Well, to start with, either somebody really impresses me, like Maria Wright, Isabel Alvarez, or they make me mad, like the treatment of the Indians, the sending nuclear waste through a lovely little town like Garrett. I used to live in Garrett when I was engaged in holy matrimony. And I have a daughter, she's little then, now she's going to IU, she's graduated. But anyway, that's how it starts. The two Cuba shows, for example, I was working at a place called Education Opportunity Center, which was run by a lady named Graciela Beecher, who was from Cuba. She got a grant, she's always getting grants, from the Department of Education, and I got to go to Chicago, Miami, New York, and here in Fort Wayne to interview 12 different Cuban American women. One of them was Isabel Alvarez. This was a feature story in the Journal Gazette. And Isabel then, on the basis of that interview, she worked at GE then, invited me to make a documentary about Cuba with her. And then another lady in that book invited me to go to Cuba several years later to document schools. That was Cuba Island in the Sky. And so that's sort of how it starts. The river trip, Abby invited me. She knew I made documentaries. I think she liked what I had done, and that was great. But then, how do you do it? I mean, for one thing, somebody mentioned about Bob's documentary. I have more documentaries, and he had to look at all those, or at least part of them, or maybe he didn't, I don't know. But anyway, you know, you have to narrow it down somehow. And if you're doing interviews and you have tons of footage, that's the big problem, is looking at all that stuff. Generally, when I did them, I had them transcribed, the interviews, because I'm not smart enough to remember an hour's worth of interviews. And generally, you can't use an hour. I'm not saying I always had an hour, but if I did, you might end up using 5 minutes. I would get them transcribed so I could actually read it and pick out what I wanted. What you pick sometimes depends on what imagery you have, what the theme is, how compelling what they say is, that sort of thing. Alex Haley, you just play everything he said. He's Alex Haley. And this was for a documentary called Echoes of the Past. And he happened to be there. He knew the people, and this was a homecoming in Norris, Tennessee, and we had lots of music and lots of general store, old artifacts and stuff in there. I just used the Alex interview. But that is always difficult for me, is selecting stuff and you know, fitting it into some reasonable time frame. I mean, for example, Anne Frank, that's a week's worth of footage into a half hour. Yeah, it had to be ruthless. Or else have a 4-hour documentary, which, you know, generally that's not practical. So you just, sometimes it's painful. Sometimes I just don't want to cut something, and I do. But I'm not saying I always make the right decisions, but I think one of the real loves is the people. I think, as I was watching, I thought that came off pretty strongly, like in Cuba, all the kids, and you just have to work at that. I mean, you have to get people's trust. I don't like sticking cameras in front of people without asking them. Sometimes I do, but especially the children. Cuba was great, though. I never had any problems. I went to schools, and nobody ever, you know, challenged me like, what's this camera for? But I'm always pretty polite and do mine and that sort of thing. I don't know, did that answer your question? Then I write every word ever in all my documentaries I've written. The Cuba Island in the Sky I did not narrate. As you probably heard my voice a lot of times. That was a high school girl who did that. From, she spoke Spanish. I wanted that sort of authentic sense. She did not go on the trip. She was looking at the footage. But, so different techniques. Joe Horncloud, I love that because my brother and I went to Pine Ridge, Wounded Knee, and a lot of documentary making is earning the trust of people. I mean, Joe Horncloud, those people have been through hell out there, through hell. And, you know, white guys showing up with a camera, they don't just say, hey, okay, let's go to Wounded Knee, I'll tell you. Joe Horncloud's father paid for the monument at Wounded Knee. 2 of his uncles were killed. I won't go into great detail. Most of you probably know the story of Wounded Knee. It was the last battle of the Indian Wars. Cavalry opened fire on Native Americans there at Wounded Knee. They were on their way to Pine Ridge. And that's why I started that clip, because Joe had said, all these scholars come, and what did they conclude? You, the savages, the Indians, we're here to annihilate our noble white people. It's totally reversed. Those people didn't have guns. They were there peacefully. Anyway, those are the sort of things I try to expose or tell. And when you get somebody the caliber of Joe Horncloud, you're just plain lucky to have him tell the story. And so, I try to expose BS when I see it. Generally, my documentaries are just stuff I feel strongly about. And or they have grown out of a theater of ideas. In 1981, I did 52 live 1-hour shows. It's no wonder I have health problems, seriously. I wrecked my health doing all this stuff. But I generally had no money, did the work of 3 or 4 people, or very little money. I had a heart attack when I was making the hunt for Oscar. And I'm so dumb, I went to hospital. What do? I take notebooks full of interviews of Gail Harris to read through to figure out what part to take. Stupid. Last thing you want to do is work. You want to relax. Anyway, back then, I still am, but I was really obsessed. I just was going to do it no matter what. I almost said, unless it kills me, and you almost did. But Betty Jane Spencer was a guest on one of those Theater for Ideas shows, because I had heard of her, of course, through the Hollinsburg. And that became my first documentary. and I got to know her. WPTA Television did that with me. They sent a crew. I think that's the only show I actually did with a TV station, but I got all the production credit and all that. And they showed it on a Sunday night in prime time. They showed it with a discussion. And I remember Keith Edwards was the anchor, and he cried when she was speaking. So did I. Sometimes this stuff is just so powerful, it just blows me. It's very difficult to sit there. And she was in the same house where that happened. They had never moved. The same house. And at the end, we show the pictures of boys, and she tells them why she's still living there, because their memories are still there. Anyway, it was a good question, because generally what I make is just what I choose to make, you know, and then the editing. I've edited, Bob edited Anne Frank and the River Traveler. Bob's a whiz on Adobe. You know, that didn't even exist till fairly recently. Like The Shadow of the Dream, that was all shot on, I think, 3/4-inch video. And then edited at Channel 21. Sometimes I edit, sometimes if I have money, I pay, go to a studio and have it edited. So, different ways. So I really appreciate all of you coming, and those clips went by pretty quickly. I was happy about that.
You got more, we're gonna have part 2.
Pardon?
You got more, we're gonna have part 2.
I have more documentaries. I have The Letter of the 21st Century. I have Fort Wayne Police Story. I rode around with police. We actually had shots fired. I remember that. I didn't want to go over like 25 minutes in case people were bored. You never know how this will work. But they were all shorts, and they went pretty quickly.
Hey, where could we find maybe some public copies or to watch some of your stuff? You have anything available?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been very poor about promoting. I've been lucky to get a lot of local publicity, sometimes national publicity, but I've been very bad, like these articles. Nathan was saying, you know, I got a friend who can really put those together. Because look at the newspapers are crumbling, and I've got tons of stuff. They really should be, at least for my ego, they should be preserved.
Yeah, I take pride in collecting everything that Terry does. I've got everything that he's got. Not everything, but yeah, I try and collect everything that he does and put on my website for everybody to see what he does here in this city.
You know, like Bob was saying, a lot of it is available on YouTube. So
And they're on YouTube. They're also on archives. They're on, some of them are on a site called Theater for Ideas, some of the documentaries. Joe Horncloud's entire documentary is on there. They should all be in one place. I mean, at various places. Sometimes, if it weren't for Bob, I don't know if I could even find some of them. Pardon?
Get Bob and Patty to work on that.
Yeah.
I'll put it on.
Are they all
Making
in
you
the
guys work.
library?
Pardon?
I said, are they all?
Some of them are, yeah. Some of them played on Access, you know, and I really want to thank Bob Hunter for the documentary he made about me. That beginning, by the way, when you heard the woman almost screaming, Bob had put together a little introduction from his documentary. That was from a play I wrote called Angel Fire. Part of the big theme of his is what I've overcome, child abuse, polio, and that's why he put that clip about my mother. Was she wasn't a big fan of mine, as you could probably tell from that. I just found out that your great aunt is the one who started the polio ward.
Well, helped with it, but she started out physical therapy.
Well, that
She's a
I
nurse.
didn't in the documentary. I go into it a little more detail, but when I had polio, I was sent to a children's ward at St. Joe Hospital. That is as close as you will find to hell on earth. Maybe in a war. There was a war zone. I mean, I thought I thought I could not be any sicker. A human being cannot be any sicker, cannot be in any more pain than I was. I got in that children's ward and I found out, oh yes, a lot worse than me. Those kids were screaming all night long. It was horrible. Polio is a horrible disease, horrible. Iron lungs, people not being able to walk, people dying. I'm lucky. I mean, I'm here still. So, anyway, any other questions? Appreciate your interest. And,
how long do you typically shoot for? How long do you typically want your documentaries to be? I heard you say one was like 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's a good question. The Hunt for Oscar had two versions. That's the full version that we showed at Cherubusco High School auditorium. I even wore a tuxedo. Yeah, and I had a broken elbow with my arm in a cast. It's a wonder I survived the Hunt for Oscar. Seriously. Heart attack and then fell off my bike, smashed my elbow. But that was a 2-hour. But for the award that I sent to apply, I did a 30-minute cut, and it won. And as I said, I got a free trip to UCLA. That's where I was really treated like a filmmaker, like somebody. Remember Gary Doan? He was living. Her friend Gary, my friend too. He was living there, and then he said, "Damn, filmmakers are king in LA." So for 15 minutes, you know, I was king. I was a filmmaker in LA, you know. So, but thank you. Yeah, generally a half hour. I think The Shadow of the Dream is a half hour. I know a newspaper guy that covered it said, basically called me nuts. He says, there's no way you can document that crime in 30 minutes. And my intent was not. And so that's another good point to Nathan's question. From the beginning, you almost have to decide a focus. Sometimes you get the focus in as you're filming even, or maybe it comes in editing. But The Shadow of the Dream, I knew it was beyond my capability to make a thorough, it was pretty thorough. I interviewed the law enforcement guy that arrested him. I went in his car, we filmed that as he's driving. I interviewed the neighbor. The Betty Jane Spencer crawled on her stomach from her house to at least a quarter of a mile to the nearest neighbor, bleeding in the middle of the night for help. And obviously she survived. But I decided I'd try to make that a half hour. I know, like the Garrett, here's a good example. I started out, I was going to document all this Yucca stuff. I was going to document the training. I was going to get pictures of the training. I thought, get serious. You need a whole great big production crew. So I just decided to do that in about one sentence at the end. I think I had the actress talk about, she's talking about a love of her town. She says, I'm worried about the train coming through, that sort of thing. So I set it up that way. And I'm hoping the ending would just be, what? Wow. You know, just sort of out of nowhere, the train explodes. So that got narrowed down from probably, you know, you'd have to have graphs and all that stuff. And I'm not good at that sort of thing. And I need to have somebody who is. And I just said, yeah, you know, it's better to show the human interest in Garrett and let that just sort of be in the background. So, yes.
Do you put like time limits on a documentary, say an hour, a year?
How long I work on it?
Yeah. Because Bob took 4 years doing your thing.
Well, it depends. When you say 4 years, I mean, maybe he worked on it every day. But over 4 years, I remember we did the first interview at St. Joe Hospital, and I know he had to transfer. So this is another thing of technology, and that's not really my thing either. But technology started with, well, back in the 70s, I just got a grant to transfer reel-to-reel, half-inch videotapes for discussion shows I did to digital. And they had sat in the library archives for 43 years, and I didn't even know it. But anyway, that was the first technology. Then it went to these big tapes, 3/4, then VHS, where the people, well, this is the 21st century, but it would be about 2190, something like that, when they would open it. You know, they're not going to play a VHS tape. But it's changed so much, and but in terms of how long I put, The Hunt for Oscar, I was obsessed with that show. That's the one show that I, by myself practically, took on to document every damn thing that happened in Churubusco from March 1949 to October, when he drained his lake. And I got footage from Colorado of the Lowell Thomas Museum, and oh my, no wonder I had a heart attack. I was just nuts with that turtle. I was just obsessed to document everything. How they met is in the documentary. How Gail and Helen met in Waynedale in a church, and all that sort of thing. And I think I learned my lesson. Nothing's worth a heart attack. I think that's why I narrowed down, like I said, the Garrett one, instead of doing all that. Probably back when I did Oscar, if I were doing Garrett, yeah, I'd do it. I probably would survive. But that was over the top. But generally, Anne Frank and the River Traveler, you know, that's different too, because you got a specific event, a specific time period. It's 1 week, and of course that entire week you're deciding. First of all, when we talk about editing, as all you guys that edit, you do a lot of editing in your mind before you ever get it onto an editing depth. I mean, because now I'm aware. I want to shoot all this stuff, and I think, oh, wait a minute, then you're going to have to look at all this stuff and make decisions. Why don't you just decide now and cut in your brain what you're not going to take? But still, you want enough stuff, because you never know what you'll need. And a trip like that, you can go back, but not with the crew, so it'll never be the same. So there's a lot of decisions in making, as you know, in any creative effort. And that's the hardest part, I think. My strength is I'm good at getting people to trust me, I think. Because I'm not aggressive male. And, you know, like South Dakota, people gave me an eagle feather. They were just wonderful to me. So that's my strength, but I have a lot of weaknesses too. But anyway, go ahead.
If it wasn't for Terry Doran, I wouldn't be a producer and host of my own show, and he would not have been my co-host. I was originally a camera person at Access Fort Wayne. Then I did one of his shows that he did for his late brother. It was about 8 years ago. And I started to get interested in what Terry was doing. So the rest is history. I got 8 years under my belt with over almost 450 shows every weekend. So 8 years.
Well, that's another beauty of art, the friends that you make. And that show is my brother. Well, he took his life in 2000, and 10 years later, my two other brothers and I did a tribute to him. And Patty ran a camera, that's how we met. And not too long after that, around that same time, I created the Three Rivers Art Center for Kids. Joe had a good friend named Chewy, a Hispanic rapper. And we did a show about abused children. This was a discussion show. And one of the guests was from the dance collective. and they sang a song that Chewy wrote based on a poem that Patty wrote, and we made about a minute dance called For the Children Dance. The dance collective, Lady Kate, choreographed it. Chewy and his partner sang it. It was beautiful. All original.
Never been
won an award.
Nothing's been done like that before ever.
And that's how Joe.
And won a Philo Award. That dance.
Yeah, as I said, Nathan advertised me as multiple award winner. I guess that's true. Eagle Gone won 3-4 awards. It was played here at this museum, the New York National Native American History Museum. Won me a fellowship, Indiana Arts Commission, where I actually got some money even. And Oscar won the UCLA Folklore, not it was a winner. And a couple others won awards too. But as I said, the friendships, the stories, like the guy here watched the only movie he ever watches, A Hunt for Oscar. What can a filmmaker ask for better than that? I mean, I love it when I compete against Hollywood and they choose my movie. I'm sorry, but I do. I love it. Like in Marion County, I love it. I mean, I knew they liked Eagle Gone, and then they took a survey, you know, and they voted that their favorite. I mean, that's great, because those were, like I said, I don't remember them, but they were all Hollywood movies, meaning they actually had movies and film and all that.
I was there.
Pardon?
I was Hoosier Homegrown in Marion area.
Yeah, Marion County, and it was called Homegrown. There were 7 movies. I could probably find the flyer somewhere.
Yeah, Hoosier Homegrown Film Festival.
Yeah, and they were all Hollywood movies made in Indiana. And I was, Eagle Gone was made in Indiana, but I guarantee you for a lot less than any of those movies were made. So that meant a lot to me. And, you know, that's better than awards. That is an award. That's people saying, you know, your work movies. So that's what I get out of it. And then personal, I don't know, something drives me. I just get angry and I do stuff.
I've got a quick question too.
Yeah.
So, when you interview people, an individual, how many times have you been inspired to continue a new topic, or you've gotten feedback or references to something you didn't know about, and you keep continually interviewing people?
Well, that like Eagle Gone, that led to Joe Horncloud, and going to Wounded Knee in Pine Ridge, and that I might try to promote that more. I mean, that was done a while back, but generally, if you've done a good job, whatever the theme, whenever you did it, there should be a timeless quality to it. That's what I hope.
Do you have anything that you've had on hold that you've
Well, I have the Garrett. This will be a half hour that started out to be a 2-hour extravaganza with showing all these trains going from the East Coast to stops here and there. Yeah, I couldn't do that. It'll be a half hour, and sometimes you just get lucky. I mean, like sometimes you almost feel like you've written a movie script, and these people, you've hired them to do it. Like I wanted to show Americana, see how you do that, and you go to 4th of July in little towns. You interview people, and this 4th of July, the high school band is playing, marching down Main Street, Randolph and Garrett, playing God Bless America. I saw that and said, God bless you. I could not ask for a better song for this movie than God Bless America. And I didn't even have to call the band director, and ask him, beg him, would you go down the street and play this song? They were just playing it. You just get lucky. But part of luck is you're there. You're there in a lot of different places, a lot of times. I went to Garrett. We moved in 04, and I but I got the idea when I was living there. But I went back about half a dozen times. Now here's another thing that you don't think of, but for me, that's keeping track of stuff. Man, I've lost some of the tapes I shot in Garrett because my organization is so bad, which is another thing that makes you decide how long something will be. But it's okay. I found the tape of the young lady, the actress. That was the main thing, and I knew I could make the show. And maybe it's better, you know, than having a whole bunch of more stuff. Anyway, yeah, and I really do, when at the premiere, one person, young lady in attendance, she asked me, she said, I want to see all your documentaries. I mean, what a thrill. I know it sounds like bragging, but I mean, I have little money, I get sick, I have heart attacks, I take pride in what I do, and, you know, this is a great. You also get nasty stuff too, which I've sort of left out tonight, the death threats and things like that, or sometimes, but it's the good stuff that keeps you going. And you know, whether I actually can pull all of them together and she'd really want to watch them, I don't know, but it's great after she saw some of these clips that she wanted to see them. Anyway, I'm talking a lot, so
I have one more
ask some more questions.
I have one more question for you before we wrap up. On the Wounded Knee, did you talk about the second Wounded Knee? You know, I saw a newspaper article about 1973 and what happened. Did you talk about the civil rights push in Wounded Knee at the time?
Well, that focus was, we went to Wounded Knee with Joe Horncloud, and he was the guide. And I talked.
Joe was an organizer for civil rights movement stuff in 1970s.
Yeah, Joe was. And he had a great irony too. Joe Horncloud obviously is a wonderful man. And he grew up as Catholic, was sent to a school where he was not allowed to speak English, to speak his language, he had to speak English. Had to cut his hair, had to dress like us. And he was working, when Nathan's talking about the big uprising at Wounded Knee, he was working for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, for the government, for the people that were responsible. And like he said in the piece, he said, we have a lot of people, you know, our people are desperate. When we were just a lost people because their whole way of life was taken from them. And Pine Ridge, I think, is the poorest single area in the United States. And this is another thing, when people are poor, a lot of people in Cuba, and they're so lovely to you, it just makes you want to do the very best you can to show them that they're human beings and they're no different from us, and they're lovely. And yes, Joe talked about that. He mostly talked about his father, who was 15 at Wounded Knee. Somehow he escaped, his father did, and somehow found the money for the monument. And but Joe shows on the monument his relatives, and it was very, very, very moving. So anyway, that came out of Eagle Gone for sure. And I got lucky because there's a group in Fort Wayne called Sophia's Portico. And there's a lady, she's now the director, Terry. She had lived in Pine Ridge. I think she was a nurse. So she introduced me, you know, by phone to a lot of people. So I should say I didn't just drop out there and they warmed up to me. I had a wonderful lady that everybody loved to say this is a good guy. But still, you've got to earn it. But yeah, anyway, that was, I'm glad I included that, because that's sort of one that people haven't paid much attention to. Anything else before we wrap up?
This guy is always creative, creating. Mine never stops. I mean, a couple of days ago, he would say this, and a couple of days later, the whole new thing opens up in his head, and he has more ideas coming in. So Always creative. Bob and I know
Yeah,
that.
the rest of me sort of falling apart, but my brain.
It's always working, you know?
And that's good.
You
That's
know,
exactly what I've been changing.
It just keeps going, pretty much. For better or for worse.
Any last questions for
Terry? After the wife passed away this year, I was gonna give up, you know, and stop, because I was gonna be moving, man. But, you know, after seeing everything that you've been doing, bud, yeah, my wife would be mad if I gave up after. Yeah, she told me, my wife told me, you know, that you guys are my friends here. And and she told me that.
Well, his wife, Sarah, passed away not long ago, so.
And she loved you guys. She loved Terry. I mean, these guys have helped me out with, I don't have no knowledge on anything. I just started up Fresh Eye Promotions with a blind eye. And these two right here, they helped me build it. And these guys, they accepted me and helped with them. And I appreciate it. And I'm going to do the favor for Terry. And I'm going to keep doing good things for this city, for Terry.
Well, thank you, Joe, and thank you, everybody, for your comments.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Nathan, for inviting me, and all you guys coming. This was great. I hope you found something good.
Please, everybody, network with everybody and check out some of your.
And I couldn't make anyone realize what it was like because it was so horrible. I know of no words to compare it with. They lined us on the floor right here in our living room, in front of the coffee table. And they shot us all at close range. I was shot twice in the back. And then they discovered that I was still alive. So they shot me again, and this time it hit my shoulder and my head. I never did lose consciousness. So I know what it's like to be murdered. I just didn't die.
18,000 acres in 1837 for $18,000. A man they'd never seen. We called the white man holy, and we called the red man savage. Then we burned down all his wigwams, subdivided all his dreams. Menominee, the man who won't sign, won't give up his honor, put his land on the line. They cut down your garden, left hardly a trace of your beautiful soul or your beautiful race.